Everyone's chasing the American dream. A cheaper house, lower bills, less stress. And these cities deliver that, on paper. Because when a place is cheap, it's not being generous, it's charging you somewhere else. I'm Senior State, and today we're talking about where the American dream costs less and quietly collects its price.
Lancaster, Pennsylvania, a place people describe as peaceful, stable, and a great value. And they're not wrong. But what they don't always mention is what you give up to get that stability. Lancaster sits about an hour and a half from Philadelphia, surrounded by farmland, history, and a slower pace of life that many Americans say they want, especially once the big city starts feeling expensive, loud, or exhausting. On paper, Lancaster looks like a solid deal. Home prices are lower than most of the Northeast, rent is manageable, crime is below national averages in many areas, and the city feels predictable. And for a lot of people, predictable sounds perfect. But let's talk about the price. Why Lancaster feels affordable. Compared to major East Coast metros, Lancaster is cheap, and by Pennsylvania standards, it's downright reasonable. Housing costs are the main draw. You can still find single-family homes at prices that feel normal, not panic-inducing. Property taxes aren't low, but they're not shocking either. And rent, while rising, hasn't exploded the way it has in Philly, New Jersey, or New York's spillover zones. Daily life is also manageable. Groceries, utilities, and insurance stay within reach. You don't need luxury income to live decently here. And if you're coming from a larger metro, your money will go further, no question. That's why Lancaster attracts retirees, young families, people leaving expensive cities, and remote workers looking for calm. Lancaster doesn't fight you financially, but affordability isn't the whole story. The economy is stable, but limited. Lancaster's economy is steady, not exciting. It's built on healthcare, manufacturing, logistics, agriculture, tourism, and small businesses. These industries provide reliable jobs, but not many high-paying ones. Median incomes lag behind national averages, career ceilings show up early, and professional advancement often requires one thing Lancaster doesn't offer much of: options. If you're early in your career, ambitious, or chasing rapid income growth, Lancaster can feel small, fast. You don't climb ladders here, you settle onto platforms. And once you're on one, there aren't many higher floors. For some people, that's fine. For others, it quietly becomes frustration. The lifestyle trade-off. Lancaster sells calm, and it delivers. It's clean, it's orderly, it's safe in most neighborhoods, and life here doesn't feel chaotic. But it's also slow. Very slow. Nightlife is limited, entertainment options are modest, cultural variety exists, but it's narrow compared to bigger cities. And after a few years, many residents describe life here with one word: repetitive. Lancaster doesn't overwhelm you, it also doesn't challenge you. And that's where the price starts showing up, not in your bank account, but in your stimulation. Taxes, growth, and reality. Pennsylvania is not a low-tax state. Lancaster isn't the worst example, but it's not escaping that reality either. Local taxes add up. School taxes hit homeowners hard, and services are decent, but they're not exceptional. Growth here is slow and controlled. That's good if you hate chaos, not great if you're betting on explosive appreciation or fast transformation. Lancaster doesn't boom, it ages gracefully. And for investors or risk takers, that's not exciting, it's limiting. Who Lancaster actually works for. Lancaster works best for people who value stability over momentum. It's ideal for retirees who want calm and predictability, families prioritizing safety and routine, remote workers who don't rely on local wages, and people who are done chasing what's next. If your life is already built, Lancaster supports it. If your life is still forming, Lancaster might quietly hold you back. The real price. Lancaster doesn't charge you chaos, it doesn't charge you crime, and it doesn't charge you outrageous housing costs. Instead, it charges you range. Fewer opportunities, less variety, slower growth, lower ceilings. You won't notice it immediately, but over time, you'll feel it. Lancaster, Pennsylvania is affordable, stable, and livable, but cheap stability comes with a trade-off. If you're done building your life, this place can hold it together. If you're still trying to grow it, Lancaster might quietly hold you back. I'm Senior State, and now you know the price.
Lubbock, Texas, a city people move to because it's affordable and leave because they finally understand why. Lubbock sits out on the South Plains, far from Texas's booming metros and even farther from anything resembling coastal energy. It's isolated, flat, and surrounded by agriculture as far as the eye can see. And that isolation is the first thing you need to understand, because everything about Lubbock flows from it. On paper, Lubbock looks like a financial win. Housing is cheap. Property taxes are high, but home prices are low enough to soften the blow. There's no state income tax, and the cost of daily life stays manageable even as other Texas cities spiral upward. For a lot of people, that's enough. But Lubbock doesn't just sell affordability, it sells endurance. Why Lubbock is so affordable? The reason Lubbock is cheap is simple. Demand is limited. There's no nearby metro pressure, no tech spillover, no coastal migration wave flooding in with high salaries. What Lubbock offers instead is space, predictability, and a housing market that hasn't been hijacked by speculation. You can still buy a house here without a bidding war. Rent won't eat half your paycheck. And if you're coming from Dallas, Austin, or anywhere outside Texas, Lubbock feels like a reset. But affordability doesn't come from generosity. It comes from trade-offs. The economy, Texas Tech, and little else. Lubbock's economy revolves around a few pillars: Texas Tech University, healthcare, agriculture, and regional services. Texas Tech keeps the city alive. Students, faculty, medical research, and sports bring money and activity. But outside of that ecosystem, opportunity narrows fast. High-paying corporate jobs are rare, career mobility is limited, and many residents hit their income ceiling earlier than they expect. If you don't work in education, healthcare, or a specialized local industry, you adapt or you leave. Lubbock doesn't punish ambition, it just doesn't reward it much either. The lifestyle reality. Lubbock is quiet. Not peaceful, quiet. The city doesn't overwhelm you with traffic or crowds, but it also doesn't stimulate you. Entertainment options are limited. Nightlife is basic. Cultural variety exists, but it's shallow and repetitive. And then there's the landscape. Flat, open, windy, relentlessly. There's no scenery to distract you, no mountains, no lakes, no urban skyline to soften the edges. Lubbock forces you to sit with yourself, and for some people, that's the hardest part. Weather and environment. Lubbock weather is not subtle. Summers are brutal. Heat, wind, and dust storms are common. Winters are dry, cold, and unforgiving when the wind picks up. This is not a place that coddles you, and over time, that constant exposure wears on people, especially those coming from greener, more varied environments. Safety and daily life. Lubbock's crime is higher than many people expect. Property crime is a persistent issue. Some neighborhoods feel safe, others don't, and the divide is noticeable. Lubbock isn't lawless, but it's not carefree either. You learn where to go and where not to. Who Lubbock actually works for. Lubbock works best for people who already know who they are.
It's a good fit for students and faculty tied to Texas Tech, people with remote jobs and low lifestyle demands, those who value space over stimulation, anyone intentionally choosing isolation. But if you crave variety, upward mobility, or cultural energy, Lubbock tests your patience. The real price. Lubbock doesn't charge you high rent, it doesn't charge you traffic, and it doesn't charge you chaos. Instead, it charges you distance. Distance from opportunity, distance from diversity, distance from momentum. At first, that distance feels peaceful. Later, it feels limiting. Lubbock, Texas is affordable, predictable, and honest. But cheap land doesn't mean cheap consequences. This city doesn't take your money, it takes your options. I'm Sir State, and now you know the price.
Johnson City, Tennessee is one of those places people discover after they've given up on big cities but aren't ready to admit it out loud because, on paper, this town looks like a win. Low housing costs, no state income tax, manageable traffic, and just enough mountains nearby to sell the idea of peace. And for a lot of people, that's exactly why they end up here. Because Johnson City doesn't try to impress you, it just tries to stay affordable. And that's the first thing you need to understand about it. This is not a city chasing growth. This is a town protecting stability, and that difference shows up everywhere. The cost of living is the headline. Homes are still relatively cheap, rents haven't exploded the way they have in Nashville or Asheville, and everyday expenses feel manageable, even on modest incomes. And if you're coming from a bigger metro, Johnson City feels like a financial exhale. But affordability here doesn't come from economic strength. It comes from economic limits. The local job market is narrow. Healthcare, education, and regional services dominate, and outside of those lanes, opportunity drops fast. Wages are below national averages, and career mobility is minimal, which means if you arrive with a job, you're fine. If you arrive looking for one, you better have patience, because this is not a place where careers accelerate. They plateau. Life in Johnson City moves slow, not relaxed slow, structured slow, the kind of pace that feels calming at first and then quietly repetitive. Nightlife is limited, entertainment options are basic, and after a while, most weekends start to look the same. And while the surrounding Appalachian scenery is genuinely beautiful, it also hides the fact that the city itself doesn't offer much variety socially or culturally, and that lack of stimulation becomes noticeable, especially for younger residents or anyone used to dynamic environments. Johnson City doesn't overwhelm you, but it also doesn't engage you, and that's a trade-off many people underestimate. Safety here is decent, but not exceptional. Some areas feel quiet and secure, others struggle with property crime and drug issues. And while it's not a dangerous place, it's not untouched either. Services are adequate but limited. Healthcare access exists, but specialized care often means driving. And public infrastructure reflects the city's priorities: maintenance over expansion, preservation over innovation, which again works fine if your expectations are already low. Johnson City appeals to retirees, remote workers, and people intentionally stepping away from ambition. It works if you value calm, routine, and low pressure. It does not work if you're building a career, seeking upward mobility, or craving cultural energy. Because the real cost of Johnson City isn't financial, it's momentum. This town doesn't take your money, it takes your urgency. And for some people, that's a fair trade. For others, it slowly becomes frustration, because cheap living only feels like freedom if you're not giving up too much to get it. Johnson City, Tennessee is affordable, quiet, and stable, but stability here comes with a ceiling, and once you hit it, the town doesn't offer many ways around it. It simply asks you to accept it. I'm Sir State, and now you know the price. Greenville, South Carolina is one of those cities people talk about like they discovered it first, because it looks clean, it feels safe, it photographs well, and it knows exactly how to sell itself. And that's why so many people end up here expecting an affordable Southern success story, only to realize Greenville isn't cheap anymore. It's just cheaper than what they left behind. And that difference matters because the city's reputation hasn't caught up with its prices yet. Greenville used to be a bargain, walkable downtown, manageable housing, and steady job growth. But popularity changes places, and Greenville has been popular for a while now. Housing costs have climbed, rents are no longer low, and while it's still more affordable than major metros, the gap keeps closing faster than wages can keep up. And that's where the first problem appears. Incomes here are modest. Professional salaries lag behind national averages, and unless you're tied to a specific industry, manufacturing, engineering, healthcare, or a remote position, your earning power has limits, and those limits show up quickly. The lifestyle is what draws people in. Downtown Greenville is polished, clean, and curated. Parks, restaurants, trails, and just enough culture to feel active without being overwhelming. But that polish comes with repetition. After a while, you realize the city isn't expanding its personality. It's refining the same one over and over. And while that works for visitors, it can feel restrictive for residents, especially younger ones. Greenville offers comfort, not challenge. And if you're looking for constant variety or fast-paced growth, this city slows you down whether you ask it to or not. Traffic has increased, infrastructure struggles to keep up, and suburban sprawl keeps pushing people farther out in exchange for affordability. And that trade-off adds time, stress, and dependence on cars. And while crime remains lower than many comparable cities, property crime is rising, and the gap between desirable neighborhoods and neglected ones is widening, which is common in fast-growing places, but still worth noting. Greenville works best for people who want stability with a hint of style. Families, professionals who are done chasing big city energy, retirees looking for safety and mild weather, and remote workers who can out-earn the local market. But if you're arriving hoping Greenville will be a stepping stone, it may quietly turn into a holding pattern, because the real cost here isn't chaos or danger, it's complacency. Greenville doesn't force you to leave, it just makes it easy to stay and harder to move forward once the shine wears off. Greenville, South Carolina is attractive, functional, and comfortable, but comfort isn't the same as opportunity, and the city's biggest selling point can also be its biggest limitation. I'm Senior State, and now you know the price.
Gainesville, Florida is one of those cities people hear about because it's a college town, and they immediately imagine energy bars, football games, student life, and cheap apartments. But the reality is a bit more complicated and a lot more expensive in unexpected ways. It's true that Gainesville is affordable compared to most of Florida. Housing costs are manageable, rents are lower than Miami, Orlando, or Tampa, and for students and young professionals, that looks like a bargain on paper. And that affordability draws people in from all over the state and beyond, and it's why so many families and retirees consider relocating here. But Gainesville's affordability doesn't come from prosperity, it comes from limitations. The local economy revolves almost entirely around the University of Florida, healthcare services, and a handful of tech or research opportunities. Outside of those sectors, income potential drops fast, professional growth is limited, and many residents hit a plateau early on. If you're not directly connected to the university or one of the larger employers, your options are narrow, and that narrowness is something most newcomers only notice after they've settled in. Life in Gainesville moves at the pace of a campus semester, calm enough to breathe but slow enough to notice repetition. Weekends blend into each other. Student events, football games, small downtown restaurants, and bar scenes offer occasional entertainment, but once the novelty wears off, residents notice that the city doesn't provide much variety for long-term engagement. And while the surrounding area is lush, green, and full of natural beauty, including parks and springs, it also highlights the contrast with the city itself. Gainesville doesn't overwhelm you with stress or chaos, but it also doesn't stimulate you in ways that make daily life feel dynamic or challenging, and that's the trade-off people overlook. The social landscape is heavily influenced by students, which is great for temporary energy but can feel transient for long-term residents. The rhythm of the city changes dramatically when classes are out, and the vibrancy many people move here for vanishes for weeks at a time, and that can be jarring if you're expecting consistent urban energy.
Infrastructure and local services are solid but not exceptional. Public transit exists but isn't sufficient to make a car optional, and traffic, though better than larger cities, can be frustrating during peak hours. Safety is decent overall, but property crime and occasional incidents remind residents that no city is perfect. Gainesville works best for people who understand exactly what they're getting. It appeals to students, young professionals attached to the university, retirees who enjoy a slower lifestyle, and people willing to trade career acceleration for affordability and green spaces. But if you're arriving hoping Gainesville will be a springboard to a booming career or diverse cultural environment, you're in for quiet frustration, because the real cost here isn't money, it's opportunity. And once you've accounted for that, cheap housing starts to feel less like freedom and more like compromise. Gainesville, Florida is affordable, green, and convenient for some, but convenience comes with a ceiling, and ceilings show themselves slowly over time. The city doesn't demand much from its residents, but it also doesn't reward ambition outside a few sectors. I'm Senior State, and now you know the price.
So there you have it. 5 cities where the American dream is cheaper, and 5 ways that price shows up quietly in your life. Cheap houses, manageable bills, calm streets. It all sounds perfect until you realize the trade-offs. Opportunity, excitement, career growth, variety, all things that money can't always buy, and all things that cheap living often takes away. Remember, affordability doesn't mean generosity. It just means someone, somewhere is paying the price. And in these cities, that someone could be you. I'm Sir State, and now you know the price of the American dream.